I was 8 years old the first time I understood that I was the quiet one in a house built for someone louder. My sister Maya was born 2 years before me, and from the moment she could talk, she filled every room she walked into. My parents kept a wall in our hallway just for her ribbons and certificates. There was never a wall for me. I used to stand at the bottom of the stairs and watch my mother frame another one of Maya's drawings, humming to herself, never once turning around to ask what I had drawn that day. It wasn't that my parents were cruel. They never raised a hand to me, never screamed. They just forgot to look. I became very good at being forgettable. I learned to keep my grades steady, but not impressive, to keep my voice low at the dinner table, to disappear into my room with a book while Maya's laughter echoed through the house. By the time I was a teenager, I had stopped expecting anything different. I told myself it didn't hurt anymore. That was a lie I got very good at telling. My name is Rima. I'm 31 now, and for the last 6 years I've worked as a speech therapist at a children's rehabilitation center, mostly with kids who've had strokes or traumatic injuries and have to relearn how to talk. It's slow work. It's not glamorous. My mother once described my job to a neighbor as something with kids. I don't really understand it. Maya, meanwhile, became a marketing director at a big firm downtown, the kind of job that comes with a corner office and a parking spot with her name painted on it. My parents could explain Maya's job in one excited sentence. Maya never made it past a shrug. Last December, Maya got married. The wedding was held at a vineyard about an hour outside the city, the kind of place with string lights wrapped around old trees and a guest list pushing 300 people. My mother spent months talking about the flowers, the band, the designer dress. She never once asked me to be a bridesmaid, even though Maya's college roommate, 2 coworkers, and a family friend she'd met twice were all standing up there in matching champagne-colored gowns. I told myself it was fine. I drove myself to the vineyard that evening, found my name on the seating chart, and discovered I'd been placed at table 14, near the kitchen doors, about as far from the head table as physically possible without being in the parking lot. I sat through the ceremony watching the back of my parents' heads from several rows behind them. I clapped when everyone else clapped. I cried a little during the vows because despite everything, I did love my sister, and weddings have a way of getting to you whether you want them to or not. During the cocktail hour, my mother found me just long enough to say my dress was a nice color before she was pulled away by someone more important. I spent dinner with a table of strangers, including one of the groom's cousins who spent the whole meal on his phone, and an older couple who asked how I knew the bride and looked genuinely surprised when I said I was her sister. When the speeches started, my father stood up and talked for almost 10 minutes about Maya. Her drive, her brilliance, how she'd always been destined for something big. The whole room was wrapped around his words. He mentioned, in passing, that he was proud of both his daughters, and his eyes swept the room and landed somewhere near my table for half a second before moving on. I lifted my glass anyway. He didn't see it. I went to the bathroom afterward and just stood there for a while, running water over my hands, looking at myself in the mirror under those soft golden lights everyone pays extra for at weddings like this. For one long moment, I genuinely thought about leaving, getting in my car and driving home and not saying a word to anyone. I told myself nobody would even notice until tomorrow, if then. But I splashed my face, fixed my mascara, and walked back out because some stubborn part of me refused to let the night end that way. About 15 minutes after I sat back down, my phone buzzed in my clutch. I almost ignored it, but the area code looked official, so I stepped just outside the reception tent to answer. It was a man named Daniel Cho, calling from the Regional Health Board. He apologized for calling so late on a Saturday, but he said he'd been trying to reach me all week and wanted to be the one to deliver the news himself rather than let it sit in an email over the weekend. The clinical trial program I had quietly applied to 8 months earlier, a pilot project to bring intensive speech therapy to underserved rural clinics, had been approved for full funding. Not a small grant. $2.1 million over 4 years, with my name listed as lead clinician on the proposal. I stood there under the string lights with my phone pressed to my ear, completely unable to speak, which felt like a strange kind of joke given my profession. Daniel laughed and said he hoped he hadn't ruined my evening. I told him, voice shaking, that he absolutely had not. When I walked back inside, I must have looked different because the older woman at my table asked if everything was all right. I said yes, better than all right. Actually, and before I could stop myself, I told her what had just happened. She got excited, said something to her husband, and within a few minutes word had rippled 2 tables over to where my mother was sitting with the wedding planner. My mother came over, asking what all the commotion was about, and the woman at my table told her, beaming, like she was the one delivering good news about her own daughter. I watched my mother's face change in real time. The polite, distracted smile dropped, and something more uncertain took its place. She asked me to repeat the number, and when I did, she went quiet in a way I'd genuinely never seen from her. My father came over next, drawn by the small crowd gathering. And when he heard the figure, he actually sat down in an empty chair next to me, like his legs needed a moment. Maya found me near the dance floor later that night, still in her wedding dress, mascara slightly smudged from crying through the ceremony all over again at some point. She told me she'd just heard, and she pulled me into a hug before I could say anything. When she stepped back, she looked at me with an expression I didn't fully recognize, something close to shame. She said she was sorry, that she should have noticed years ago how much space she'd taken up without ever checking if there was room left for me. I told her I loved her and that I meant it, but that things were going to look different going forward. I wasn't interested in punishing anyone. I just wasn't going to keep shrinking to make myself easier to overlook. I left the reception that night alone, same as I'd arrived, driving back into the city by myself with the radio off. But somewhere on that drive home, the silence in the car didn't feel like loneliness anymore. It felt like room to breathe. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anyone at that vineyard to turn around and finally see me. Someone already had, and it turned out that was enough.